Well, it is 3 o'clock Central here in Minnesota, so we're going to get started. I know everyone is super excited about today's topic, as witnessed in our chat window, and Megan and I are super excited to share the information today. Um, so sit back, enjoy, and we'll have some more interactive pieces today as we go along as well. Use the chat window for questions, and we'll get started. We want to welcome you to Unraveling the Mystery of AAC, Matching Systems to Needs. If you haven't joined us before this week, I'm Heather Prenovo, and I'm an SLP up here in Minnesota and AAC consultant for Saltillo for Minnesota and Wisconsin, and I have the lovely Megan Coons with us.
Hey guys, if you are just joining for the first time today, I'm Megan Coons and I'm the Regional Consultant AAC Specialist here for PRC in Minnesota. So Heather and I work super closely together. Glad you're here. And if you've been here for Monday and Tuesday, then welcome back.
Yes, we are enjoying seeing some familiar names and excited to keep going with this unraveling that ball of twine with our AAC. And here we go with some of that housekeeping background stuff. If you are having any audio difficulties, sometimes logging off and logging back in will help with that. You can also, if you're using the web-based version, click on the purple flower up in the right corner, and that will trigger downloading the desktop version. That'll download and allow you to join that way, and sometimes that'll help. And then if you still are having problems, contact Log Me In. But hopefully those will assist you. The handouts are in the materials tab of that taskbar, so definitely download those. We have the notes handout, the tools handout, and the ASHA forms. The feedback survey that pops up at the end of the class, we are so thankful for those who have taken time to give feedback. We really do appreciate it. We love the topics you've suggested, and we'll share that with our training and implementation team. So thank you. And then proof of attendance will be emailed to you usually an hour or two after the class ends. That'll have a certificate of attendance in there for you, as well as a link for the materials if you hadn't downloaded those. Please use the chat window to ask questions as we go along. We'll try to address them as we can. If you do have ASHA CEU registry, you're able to submit your ASHA participation form to PRC-Saltillo within the next 15 days at the email listed here, info@prcsaltillo.com. And please include today's training date and the name of the training, and that way we'll be able to submit that. If you don't use the registry, you can still use the certificate of attendance. The instructions are one of the handouts, and then the participation form is the other one. You must stay online the entire time to get that credit, and if you have to log off and log back in, it is time stamped, and so it'll show that you've been here.
As I mentioned, I'm Megan Coons, the regional consultant here in Minnesota that covers the PRC line of products. So looking at accent devices, as well as LAMP, Unity, Essence, and Unidad software. My full disclosure financially is that I am an employee owner of PRC-Saltillo, and I do not have any non-financial disclosures at this time.
And as mentioned, I'm Heather Prenovo. I am the PRC-Saltillo regional consultant here of Minnesota and Wisconsin, covering the Saltillo products and applications, so the NovaChat, TouchChat, WordPower, vocabulary files. My disclosures are listed here. I am also an employee owner of PRC-Saltillo, and then non-financially, I won't read them all this time, but you'll see that I've joined a few committees. And as promised, we're going to interact with our poll. I'm going to launch that here. And we want to know, why are we here today? So which one of these kind of speaks to you and your reason for being here? I have assessed my child or student's communication and access needs, but don't know what to do next. Or is it, I'm not familiar with very many AAC apps or devices, so how do I know what I should trial? Or is it, I'm not sure what features will match my child, student, or individual's needs to start that trial? Or is it other? And if you select other, feel free to share out in the chat window what that other reason for joining us today is. We'll give everybody a a little time to do the clicking as they're logging in and reorienting themselves with GoToTraining. Awesome, Martin. Pure interest in a new topic. I love it. Sometimes it's those topics or those names of the trainings that draw you in, right? Or as people have mentioned in the previous trainings, just wanting to get more info, keep learning, helping teachers and parents new to AAC, getting lots of good ideas to help them. Awesome, Tracy. All right. We are going to close out the voting. Not really voting, but you know what I mean. And here's our results. So about 27% saying that it's reason number one that you've assessed and now I want to know what to do next. 55% on, what system do I trial? And 71% kind of that feature matching portion, which yay, that's what we're going to discuss today. And then 16% are sharing with the chat windows for us. So awesome. We appreciate your participation with that. So let's get started. We always like to start off with our agenda for the day. So we're going to talk about that feature matching, which others have mentioned. Once we go through the feature matching and kind of a tool to help you sum up everything we've covered in the consideration process and assessment, Megan's going to share information about looking at our case study guide, Max, and what PRC solutions might match his needs based on those features we're looking for. I'll share some information about Saltillo solutions that might meet Max's needs. And we'll talk about those next steps. So again, these are two options, give you kind of the process through, and then you compare with other options available to you and follow those next steps. And obviously we'll have time at the end for some questions. The handouts are going to be similar with the icons that you might have seen on the last two. There's a notes handout, a tools handout, and then we have website resources. So on the slides, you'll see these icons pop up, and we try to refer to you where those are as well so that you can take notes, as well as have tools to use later after the training. So you've probably heard about feature matching when it comes to AAC, but what does that really mean? There's always, those catchphrases, those most common things we're hearing. So today we're going to gather up the information that we looked at with those tools yesterday and thinking about those myths and competencies from day one. And then we're going to talk about how all of that can match up with AAC system features. We can think of it as putting all of our assessment pieces into a funnel. And I believe Megan brought that up yesterday, that we're just taking all this information, we put it into the funnel, and then we see what comes out. And we are going to be seeing what comes out by looking at what AAC systems match up with all those features that have been addressed during an assessment. We want to know what's going to work well for our client, our student, the individuals we're working with, and move to a device to trial with them. Depending upon the individual's needs, you may have one or two options that would match, or you could have 3, 4, or 5 things that might match their needs. We know there's lots of things out there, and all have those various things that might help you. This process is designed to just help whittle things down a little bit more manageable list so that it doesn't seem as overwhelming. As you become more comfortable with AAC options and build your knowledge around all those different features, you'll be able to do a lot of this by ruling in and ruling out without doing a hands-on trial with certain systems, and it'll become a little bit faster. So starting out, this is seeming labor intensive, but it'll become more automatic the more you do it. So in your tools handout, there is a form that we put in here for feature matching, and you can use this to pull all of that information together. There's room to talk about information from the ELP for AAC, the AAC set framework, the pragmatics profile, and that participation inventory. If you've used other AAC assessment tools, you can fill those pieces in where they fall on this type of a form. These are features that you will be looking for in the AAC systems that you want to trial. And remember yesterday we talked about having goals or things that we really want to work on, or we really want to see our AAC systems address, what we want to improve for communication for our individuals that are trying these. We want to make sure that those get jotted down on this feature matching thing as something to prioritize. So if we have something we want to specifically target, make that a priority to find in your AAC systems. Yes, there's lots of bells and whistles out there on certain systems. And like Megan mentioned yesterday, sometimes we go to conferences and we see all these shiny new things, but is it going to meet the needs and priorities of our individual? I always like to do that. Just because it can do something doesn't mean we have to use that or it's needed. So use this to help guide. These could be key features that guide your decision for what to trial, or rule out a system that maybe it worked well, but it was missing that key feature. The biggest thing I can always advise is to remember that one size does not fit all individuals. There's not a single AAC system out there that's going to be best for all users, and we're aware of this. I'm always a little concerned, and I took this viewpoint after working in the schools and working with a variety of different systems. When we walk into a room and all the kids are using the same system, and we know there's that universal approach, there's lots of different reasons, but sometimes it's a little disheartening if we're just this kind of a classroom, or all our kids use this. If we're looking at how the communication partners understand and use certain systems, we get that. But that should not be the ultimate deciding factor. It should be a piece of the puzzle. We want to make sure we're finding what meets the needs of our complex communicators the best. And so when we're looking to trial devices, remember that multiple roads can lead to that one destination. Take into consideration that one device or app may not meet all your needs, so think about the ones that meet most of their needs. And we'll walk through these things as we consider starting with voice output. We're going to look at access needs, message formulation, portability, and durability, just as some to highlight when you start to put things into the funnel. And you'll also want to keep in mind a few other things that are not directly related to the child or the student and their communication needs, but should be factored into that decision when we are considering trial options. We know there's a lot of AAC apps available for iPads, and that's great for so many users. But if you have a client who tries to get out of the app, or is always trying to get out of guided access, or they want to use the iPad just for games instead of communication, or they need something more durable, and then we really should look at those dedicated devices to see if that's going to meet their needs better. Most AAC manufacturers have an app version of their dedicated device, so if that language system meets their needs, and you know that the reasons why the iPad's not going to work for them, then check out the dedicated version of that. We can also keep in mind that iPad-based dedicated devices require that guided access and restrictions for it to be funded. In order for insurance to consider it a dedicated device, we have to do those things as manufacturers. And this means that you don't have access to updating the app in the App Store unless it's paid to have it unlocked, which often, in our case, in many other situations, you're going to have to send the iPad in for those updates. So they'll be without their system to do those software updates. Also consider funding sources may also point you in a particular direction, unfortunately. Some may ask why you didn't just look at that less expensive iPad version. So you'll have to have that as part of your report and justify what it is about something else that met their needs more. So knowing what features are needed for your student or your client will help you write up that justification for the dedicated device. And then also we want to look at what kind of training and support companies offer. We know that varies across the board. PRC-Saltillo provides free training and support to families and teams for the life of the device. We also offer trainings and support during the trial period. So for some teams, that could make or break a successful device trial. If they weren't completely sure about how to set it up or all the features or why it's organized the way it is, it might not go very well and they're not getting the whole picture of what that device or that app can do for them. As you start looking at what systems might benefit your communicator, One of the first things we always look at is, do we need voice output? A lot of teams will start with low-tech boards and books, which is awesome because it's easy and readily available. And so just knowing if that's meeting their needs, do we need the voice output? If we do, then we need to justify why that's more helpful. For instance, I had a preschooler who knew his board inside and out, and he would start combining symbols, words on his board, but his peers as a 3- and 4-year-old did not always understand what he was trying to tell them. So we needed voice output to be more effective with communicating with his peers. And if voice output will help them communicate in more situations with more people, we also need to talk about, do we need amplification so that it can be heard in a variety of situations? And as we saw on the SET framework handout, there's many synthesized voices out there for devices, as well as the ability to record your own voice for a button. If you've got a bilingual student, you'd want to see if there are different languages available or different dialects available with those synthesizers. So just things to keep in mind. And then next, we want to consider any access barriers to the AAC system. If they were able to use their pointer finger and access a touchscreen successfully, direct selection is what we usually look at. If they need some help with accurately selecting the button on the screen, you could consider using a key guard for some support. If we need a little bit more support, the bottom middle picture is a touch guide, and so that provides just a little bit more support, little smaller holes, so that they have more support to get more precisely into that button. We might also be looking at, they can't direct select. So how are we considering a wired switch or a Bluetooth switch to access the screen and scan the buttons? On the screen here, you see a Bluetooth switch in the top middle row there. Also, if their hands or other body parts are not available to access a switch, we can look at head tracking or eye tracking for selection on the screen. And so there's 2 different options pictured up there as well. We take all that information from our assessment tools and point us towards access options that we want to consider during our trial. Some devices don't have access to switch scanning, and some may not be available with a head tracker. So again, we need to rule those out without trialing them based on, we know that that's not a feature. Yes, you can do switch scanning on many apps, but it is not as robust. It's not as customizable as, say, some of the dedicated options out there. So again, if that's where you're primarily heading, that would be one of your justifications for saying, you know what, we're ruling out the iPad with this app because we need access to this kind of feature. I'm always monitoring Facebook user groups and listening to questions that are out there, and I'll see a lot about, we purchased an iPad with an app and now we want to find a key guard later, or, oh, I did this and now it doesn't match up. And so just kind of keeping that in the back of your mind too, that those things that can be bundled together, and because if you're buying it from the manufacturer and the key guard matches up specifically to the specifications of those buttons, it might fit better. So again, one size doesn't fit all, but just keeping those things in mind as you look at your different options.
All right. So we've definitely thought through those access considerations as Heather guided you. We've thought about voice output options. Now it's really time to get to kind of that bread and butter. We're going to start thinking about language options on the device. So what is the primary method of the message formation that we're going to be using on the device? And how are we going to explore these different options? So we are now really in a place to be thinking about language skills. We're thinking about communication skills and how a device might be set up to accommodate the user's needs. So again, we're taking all of that information from the toolkits that we've gone over the last 2 days to kind of put this together, figure out what features we're looking for. So oftentimes AAC systems are set up by how the message on the device is formulated. Most systems, I would say, really do have a combination of ways to create messages, but it's something to be aware of that is one of the differences between some of the devices that are out there. Some devices might use core vocabulary words, so really looking at what words are used most often, and putting kind of the emphasis on using those individual, single, high frequency words. Other devices might have pre-stored sentences where you would push a button and it would speak a whole sentence. Some devices might have both, core words, pre-stored sentences. We might be looking at, do we have a need to access a keyboard where we might be doing some spelling? Do we have a need for maybe a more specialty type of configuration? For example, PRC has a software program called Core Scanner that really is kind of built from the ground up to be used by people who use switch scanning and are kind of learning that more complex access method the same time that we're giving them access to robust vocabulary. So keep in mind that a system might have one of these, or it might have a combination of these different ways to formulate a message. So when you're matching features to your needs, you might want to determine which way the student is currently communicating. Is that through single words? What does that look like? Are there other tools that they're using at this time? And where would we like to see them go in the next 3 to 5 years? So for the emerging communicator, having access to those really high frequency core vocabulary words might be most important, especially to kind of help with that literacy development piece. But we're also probably planning for the future goals. So maybe as we start to enter middle school, having some pre-programmed phrases in there might be a benefit, or having quick phrases for emergency type information might be a benefit. If we are working with an adult who maybe has a more acquired type of diagnosis, they might prefer something that doesn't have symbols and maybe is a more familiar interface, like a keyboard that you could simply kind of type in to talk, that links to quick phrases or sentences, guiding personal cares and social interaction. So just know it could be one of these, could be a combination of these. Next, we're going to consider what size of the device is going to be most appropriate. Some of the questions that you might be asking yourself here would be, are there any visual concerns that we might need to be aware of that's really going to warrant the screen size? Maybe we need a larger screen size. Are there fine motor concerns that we need to be thinking about? Sometimes in the case of fine motor skills, just making the device bigger isn't always better. So in that case, a smaller screen with the support of a key guard might provide more tactile support and also mean less gross motor involvement to move from the left to the right of the screen or the top to the bottom. We might also be thinking about, what are their gross motor needs? What does their gait look like? Is the goal that they're going to carry the device independently? Are we thinking about mounting equipment? Does the size play into that? So a super heavy device obviously is not going to be as portable, right, for them to carry independently. Other things I'm thinking about here would be access method. Sometimes when we think about the access method as it relates to the size, there could be some additional important considerations. If we're working with an individual that has a more progressive type of diagnosis and we're anticipating perhaps a decline in their fine motor skills or abilities, and we're sort of foreshadowing that direct selection with their hands and their ability to do that might decline, we might be planning kind of for those future needs that could happen in the next 3 to 5 years after they get that device. And to plan ahead, we might be picking the device size based on what additional access methods the device might be compatible with. So maybe for this individual, they're going to go from being a direct selector to using head tracking or eye tracking. So in that case, we might want to look at the size device that we could add those pieces of equipment onto to best support their needs kind of now, but in the future, so that it can really grow with them. In thinking about the size of the device, I'm really reminded of this little guy that I was working with. Cute as a button, big old glasses, sweetest little kindergartner you've ever met. And he was going through a device trial, and the team knew that he had some vision needs, but at the time when they started the trial, they weren't, we didn't maybe have a diagnosis there to know with certainty kind of what he was able to see visually on the screen. So they were really leaning towards the largest size device, which was a 14-inch screen, and he was using 2-switch scanning. So one button moves it and one button selects it. So he's in this teeny tiny pediatric wheelchair, and he has a lot of medical equipment that is kind of attached to him and hangs off of his chair. And so we have kind of the largest device, this 14-inch screen, because at that time the team was really thinking that visually, the larger the buttons, the easier it would be for him to see, and he might be able to use some of his functional vision to navigate this device. But through the device trials, what they actually found out was more information about what his vision needs were. He had some formal diagnosing that happened at that time that gave us more information. But what we saw happen during the device trial is that he would actually close his eyes when the device was scanning and turn his head away from it. So that really, he was really relying on pure auditory scanning. So he's doing more listening, right, than using that vision, and doing so with a very high rate of success for his age. It kind of blew us all away. So when I'm thinking about him turning his head, closing his eyes, I kind of think of that as like maybe he's trying to shut down that sensory process, trying to shut down the vision so he can focus more clearly on what the device is saying. It seemed to us, and that he was able to communicate back that he really preferred to not use the screen visually, but use it more auditorily. So in this case, the size of the symbols that we first started with, they were never going to be large enough for him to really extract enough information visually from the screen. So having this giant device with these giant symbols didn't necessarily matter. And what he ended up actually picking for a device and was able to navigate very well was the smallest size device, because he was using that auditory scanning versus the visual piece. So in this case, it took some working through to get to the right tool, but he was able to use this very successfully with 2-switch auditory scanning. So all of these pieces are really taken into consideration when we're thinking about that size.
And I was just going to say right with you along those lines that I have heard of many individuals who, if they're doing auditory switch scanning, are using something like the 5-inch screen from Saltillo NovaChat here, because yeah, they aren't looking at it and they'll actually have it hanging behind them. So, they're just listening and using their switches, and that works for them. So we got to keep all of that in mind.
Yeah, and the family, we talked a little bit yesterday, if you were with us, about the goals for the family, and what the family wants is equally as important. And I know one of the big concerns with Mom was the size of this device compared to the size of her son.
Right.
The device was big and he is tiny, and it was taking up a lot of space around him. She had worried about, will that limit his social interactions with people to have the larger device in front? And also with a lot of medical equipment, space was hard to find. So that's exactly what they did, Heather, was mounted on the back of his chair, and he had the 2 wireless switches that were then out in front of him. He was able to, hit one to move it and hit the next one to select it with a really high rate of success. So moving on to looking at durability, certainly, the durability of the device for a lot of younger pediatric kiddos that Heather and I see really becomes a very important consideration. Sometimes when we're thinking about like what is the most important consideration, I feel like durability can easily kind of come to the top of that list. Maybe for some of our adult-based users, durability is maybe not at the top of the list. So it is for some, isn't for others. But I think if the device is something that's kind of getting carried around on a daily basis, or if it's ever getting tossed into a backpack, hopefully not for most of the day, but just for short transportation trips, durability can really matter. So if we're working with kids with low muscle tone, we really need to be thinking about how durable the case on their device is, and is there perhaps an added case that you could put on to beef up that durability and protection? Um, is there a high likelihood that the device could get bumped, dropped, or even maybe thrown? That might lead us to wanting kind of that more durable piece of equipment. Maybe an off-the-shelf solution just doesn't have that added durability like durable medical devices do. So it's really something to think about here. And certainly, like I mentioned, you might be supporting an individual who's very independent in their device use, is ambulatory, and perhaps durability is just not a concern. Maybe here portability is kind of what comes more to the top of that key needs list over durability. But definitely diving deeper here into those durability needs helps guide this process. Heather mentioned this briefly a little bit earlier, but this is a big question that we get when we're out meeting with folks, is just what's the difference between getting a communication app on an iPad versus getting the same communication app on a device? We just wanted to kind of talk through some of this with you and spend a little bit of time here. So, you know, certainly the ease to browse and scroll and pick different apps kind of at your leisure through the App Store is super appealing to many families that we support. And in some cases, it's a really great option and a good direction to go. But we know that it might not be the best fit for everybody, right? So sometimes it's like that's when we had talked yesterday about picking the shiny thing, sometimes the shiny thing comes to us and somebody else has picked it, right? So we certainly do recognize that the process to obtain AAC through insurance can be lengthy, and there's kind of it's kind of a twisty road to get to that device acquisition piece. So we understand that the perk or the beauty in it is that, you know, that App Store is very easy to get to kind of pick that device and be ready to go. But here are some other pieces to kind of think through if you're weighing, does the app meet our need on an iOS device, or do we need kind of that more dedicated device? So let's take a closer look at some of those features that we talked about earlier. So if we're looking at, you know, iOS options, we're really thinking about like, what is the individual's access method? What vocabulary file or vocabulary feature needs do we need? And are they available on the app versus on a dedicated device? Some other questions I might be asking is, do we have a need for mounting equipment? Or do we have a need for eye gaze or head control or switch scanning? Do we have a need for those key guards or touch guides? So I might be starting there to say, how specialized of equipment are we kind of in need of that might guide me one way or the other way? If we're looking for a system that uses switch scanning, for example, we're kind of asking ourselves, does the vocabulary program or the app that we're looking at have built-in scanning? Or is it a program that uses the iOS's system scanning? Other things to think about are, if it is a switch scanning program, does it have additional settings that can be tweaked to really provide that just right level of customization to support their needs? So can we slow down the switch? Could we do a customized switch pattern, for example? Those might be things that you could find on a dedicated device that might not be on an app, where we might have a more limited customization window. What's the sound quality on the iOS device, and does it meet the individual's needs? For some people it may, for others it may not. So is the sound that's actually coming out of that device amplified enough to meet their needs in different environments? So we're kind of going back to that set framework, the student, the environment, the task, and the tools, all as it relates to communication. So what environments are we in? Is it a loud classroom? Is it a separate level of the home where we might be downstairs and we're calling attention to somebody that's on the upper level of the house? We need that device to be loud enough. Can we be heard on the playground and in other social environments like a noisy coffee shop? So another consideration there for you. We already talked about durability. This is certainly probably a big area where you'll see some differences between iOS devices or tablets and a dedicated communication device. So again, if durability is kind of top of the list of features that you're looking for, that might steer the direction that you go as well. And then asking yourself kind of what happens if the device does need repair. If you're purchasing on that iOS side or app, is there a warranty for that tablet or that device that's really going to protect that long-term daily use? One big difference that we see is kind of what the training and support piece looks like for apps versus dedicated devices. Some people need that training and others do not. So just kind of inquiring or looking closer at what is provided is really important. So is it only pre-recorded online trainings that are offered, or do you ever get any in-person support with an individual? For those apps, also kind of inquiring on, is there a cost for that additional training? So cost certainly is a big piece of this consideration as well. When iPads are purchased off the shelf, they can't be billed through insurance in the same way that durable medical equipment could be. So this would be a direct out-of-pocket expense generally that kind of falls to the family. So in addition to the iPad, other things that we're probably purchasing would be the iPad itself, the vocabulary program from the App Store, perhaps an enhanced case, maybe a custom-made key guard. And if we're kind of saying that the voice may not be loud enough, we might be adding on a voice amplifier as well. And then diving deeper into mounting equipment. So you could see how those expenses could really stack on each other, and the family might have more limited funding sources to cover that type of approach. So the other big one that Heather mentioned too is just, does the individual need a dedicated device that can only be used for communication, or are we looking for something more multi-purpose? You guys know that for so many people that we support, the iPad represents free time. I know it does for me. It's where all of my scrolling happens, right? When you go into the black hole and I'm like, what am I doing here? But you know, it's free time. It's your leisure time. It's your YouTube time, your gaming time, all of those fun things. So when all of those really fun activities and things that were highly motivated and rewarding to us are just as equally accessible to us as our communication program is that we're learning, sometimes it's not the communication program that's going to win. It's the YouTube, or it's the gaming platform, or whatever it is. So finding a system that can be dedicated for communication and really used solely for that purpose helps eliminate some of those distractions to keep us more focused on the communication goals. So really here, you know, focusing in on what you identified as the most important features is truly going to help guide you and guide your decision between, does the iOS device meet our needs the best, or are we really looking for that piece of durable medical equipment?
And I was going to just piggyback off of that having worked with older students who, you know, we know they can differentiate between the communication app and, you know, navigating to it. A harder part for some of my students was, if I'm doing something maybe for education or leisure on the iPad and I want to tell you about it, holding that thought, going into my communication app, and then formulating my message. Now I don't have that referent either. And so again, just depends. I have plenty of young adult users who love the integration portion, which we talked about yesterday. And that is really important, that they want to be able to use their app to help with email, to help with social media. And that, you know, needs to be considered as well. So like we said, not better or worse, but just things to be considering. And there were some good questions that I did want to quick jump in, Megan, and ask. We did have someone ask about, you know, using PECs and core boards and those static-based boards or communication books. Do we have an idea, or do we have any suggestions on who is a good candidate for those? And I would just say, I don't have like a profile. I often had individuals who maybe were more verbal but unintelligible and used the static board or the book for clarification, or I have individuals who use a combination of certain instances. We have that book or that board because we don't want the device in that, you know, environment or for that activity. And so, yeah, I don't have a good profile per se of who did better with just core boards or static books. Um, and then another question as we are feature matching when we're looking at like switch core scanner or something like lamp with the tactile key guard. Is there a good feature match, Megan, that you've noticed for those access modes?
Yeah, so if we're looking at the difference between using a switch with the core scanner vocabulary programs, that's the one I was talking about, was made from the ground up for people who use switch scanning, or something like LAMP with the tactile key guard. So LAMP and core scanner, if we're talking pretty specific about these vocabularies, they're actually, core scanner is the LAMP words for life vocabulary, but it's been optimized so that the words that are most frequently used are scanned first. I also might be asking, we're looking at fine motor skills here. Lamp words for life is going to be that grid of 84, and we would have a tactile key guide that we could use with it. So we're looking at really what do we know about their fine motor skills? I might start with that to determine if we're going to do this tactily with direct select on the screen, if we're going to look at those switches. So I would start with, what does access look like? Maybe pulling out the ELP if you were in our session yesterday and kind of taking a closer look at those access-based needs there. I did see that we had one more question.
I
Somebody
think
was
we'll address
asking.
it in the next one for funding.
Oh, yep. Thanks. Yes, for funding
Yeah,
iPads. We'll
I was
get to
going to
that
say,
here.
should we answer it now? But I think the next slide is on funding. So,
We're
Shelley, we're
headed
going to answer that next.
there. So certainly, yeah, funding, whew, right? We never want the cost of AAC to guide the decision or the process, really, for what system is best for somebody. However, it certainly is something that we have to be very mindful from the very beginning of the process. Because there's various sources for funding AAC, and depending on what the source is, that could really sort of dictate which direction that you go. So we know that talking about money with families is never super comfortable. It never really is.
No.
But talking directly about what funding source, or even multiple funding sources like insurance that a family might have access to, is a very critical part in this process. I always think that the earlier that we start this conversation, even when, we're first starting to talk to the family about AAC, it helps just set up the expectation, a realistic expectation for kind of how the process could go, and puts people's mind at ease the further you get into the process. So we usually really encourage families to contact their insurance. Every insurance is different. Every policy even, could be different with different benefits. So it's really an important step to have the family reach out to their provider, inquire about what coverage could be for speech generating devices, because we find it saves a lot of headaches, and in some unfortunate cases, some heartaches too. If we perhaps got through, further in the process where we really had our hopes high for something, and then later found out that the family didn't have coverage through their insurance. So in some cases, the funding source will kind of dictate that route for you, as I mentioned. Some insurance companies right now, are requiring, let's say we know one that requires like a 3-month trial. So that's information that you would need to get, we would get from the insurance company, and we would know right at the very beginning of this consideration process that we were going to need to go through with a 3-month trial. Maybe that isn't something that you had planned on, and if you found it out too late in the process, right, you might be doubling the amount of time that you're really looking at something. So some do require that formal trial. I'd say most here in Minnesota do not, but some do. So
That's going to be my suggestion too, is if you're uncertain about anything, or sometimes we see trends too. So reach out to your consultants from the various manufacturers and just be like, hey, what are you noticing? What do you know? because we can share what we've seen or what we've come across. And I just had this happen where I knew certain one had, had this process. Well, they just added a new requirement. And so, now I can share that with SLPs like, hey, I didn't know in August and July, but now as of October 1st, they have this new requirement. So here's another thing that we need to do before you start that trial so that if we do move towards funding, it's covered.
Absolutely. And Heather, you'd agree with me that we've definitely had those cases come up where AAC was later found to be an exclusion of the policy.
Yeah.
So what that means is that
the bigger piece.
yeah, they don't have the benefit to cover that under their insurance policy. So like appealing that decision is just not going to be an option because their policy really simply does not cover it. So let's say that we didn't know this till later in the process. Think how devastating that would be to everybody that we think we found the right tool. And now it's like, oh my gosh, what is the funding source? That causes people to panic. So, if a family has a primary insurance policy, the coverage is based on what their plan entails. And in some cases, the family might also have a secondary policy. So it'd go through that primary and then it would go through that secondary. So in the case of a primary insurance, the family's really looking at what's their out-of-pocket max, what are the deductibles that their policies and plans have in place. And if the family has a portion that they might need to pay out of pocket. So in the case here in Minnesota, if a family has a primary insurance, we'll give Blue Cross Blue Shield as an example, but they don't have a secondary insurance, it's really going to be up to looking at the benefits for that primary plan to see where they are for their out of pocket for the year to better anticipate what the family might have to pay out of pocket. So if AAC is an exclusion of the policy or there isn't coverage, we certainly have had families look to alternative funding sources. There are grants that are out there that could be a viable avenue as well. But I think it's always nice when we can start the process knowing this versus feeling a little defeated to find it out midway through.
And then I would say for the question that Shelley had about insurance funding iPads. So most manufacturers have an iPad-based system. Somebody mentioned PRC's Prio Mini, and we also have the Via Pro, and then Saltillo has the TouchPad Express 8 and the Via Pro. Those are both iPad-based that we're able to bundle as a dedicated device to get funded. And so always asking again, and then looking at those features on whether or not that meets the needs. So I usually, if you've met with me and I'm looking at those options with you, I lay it all out and let the families and the teams decide what features are most important. Because I've had a team who the shipping it in for updates and those kinds of things wasn't an issue. They just really felt like all the other features of the Via Pro matched their son's needs. And so I'm always upfront. These are all the features. Let's match them. What meets your needs the best. So.
Exactly.
Awesome.
All right. That training and support piece that we hinted about earlier, it's really one of the final things, to consider is how much training is offered to families and teams when you're considering a particular option. Some of the questions might be, is the training more of an informational meeting, or is it a consult one-on-one with somebody from that company that's going to walk me through? Is that support provided kind of at the start of the consideration process? Does it continue through the trial? And does that support and training change once a device is purchased? So if there is a fee for trainings, I want to know who the fee might be for. Is the fee just for families? Is the fee for professionals? Or are there other limitations for who could be trained, or maybe like a limit to the number of trainings or sessions that could be provided? So really important considerations to think about here. Some people, certainly might already be familiar with a particular system and they can easily pick it up and have the tech skills, right, to really run with it during the trial and not have a need for that ongoing support. while others might be more successful, especially if they aren't super tech savvy, to have that ongoing training and support. So after that actual acquisition of the device, then again, we're asking kind of what is provided for training, what is provided for support. I always say, like, we're looking at communication as a skill that grows across the lifespan. And what we know this year could change perhaps next year. So let's say that we get a communication device this year, the team is super well trained, but the child moves and they go into a different school and the school's never seen the device before. What happens? Is that training and support going to be provided kind of to that new team that's surrounding the individual that's using device? So asking these questions at the beginning of the process can definitely help you make that decision here on how important the training and support piece is for the communicator, and also for the individuals that are supporting that communicator in using the device, if that's the case.
And I have taken away a quote from a previous consultant trainer that I worked with, and thinking about kind of, again, iPad apps, dedicated devices, those kinds of things. Thinking of, iPad, buying your app on an iPad, it's kind of a DIY. And if you are tech savvy, you know the system and you don't need extra training on how to use it and implement it, and all the things that we've listed, it's a great option and head for it. And so again, if you're talking through those families, because I've had, we totally get it, we know how to use this, we've used it before, again, don't rule it out just because maybe in our mind something is different. We gotta meet their needs. So.
All right, so your key takeaways here from our feature matching section is to look at the features a system has that align with the individual's needs. That's really what's going to lead us to the device that we might want to consider for a trial. This approach really can help weed out all of the devices, actually rule them out as part of the process. And that's part of the process that's needed for funding, is that we've ruled out other options, that don't meet the needs. So prioritizing the features is really the key to success here, and it helps simplify the work of going through the consideration. So if we know that for this individual to be successful, they absolutely need a very large screen, as an example, then we focus on that key priority and we're looking for devices with this size screen, and we're funneling out devices that don't have that screen. So we can really simplify it based on that list of features. All right, here. So with these considerations in mind, if you were with us earlier in the week on Monday and Tuesday, we presented a case study to you, and Max is our case study kiddo, and we're gonna be talking about Max today as we look a little bit closer at feature matching for him. So wanted to just kind of reintroduce him if you aren't familiar with who Max is.
It's adorable.
Yeah, he's adorable, right? So in reviewing the feature matching sheet here, this is one that is in your handouts. We can see that Max does need some support with his fine motor, and in our consideration process, we've identified that he might benefit from a key guard or a touch guide. And through this process, we've also ruled out other alternative methods of access here. So we have those selected under Direct Select under the Access Method section. When we dive down to the primary message formulation area, we might be looking at a system that has those high frequency core words. We're looking at putting single words together in a novel way. We might need some pre-programmed phrases in there, and the ability to use a keyboard as he's working on spelling and those literacy skills. And we're really kind of thinking for him, it's going to be a combination of all of these. So core words, single words, phrases, and the keyboard. We're looking at the screen size. We're looking at a device between 8 and 10 inches. And we're looking for this device to be durable because he does have low tone. And along the same lines, if he's going to carry this independently, he probably would benefit from a carrying strap and a handle to help him with transporting the device. When he's using the device on a table, it would be beneficial for the device to also have kind of a kickstand that pops out on the back to support that low tone and kind of getting his hand into the right position to access the device with direct select there. We've identified that the most beneficial device for this particular kiddo would be a dedicated communication device. So that would mean that it doesn't have some of those extra features on it. We're really focused on this for communication at this time. And what we know about Max that we want to jot down here is that we know who his insurance is. So we're going to jot that down, that he has a primary as well as a secondary insurance that's going to help to make sure that they would have coverage for this device, or at this time we'd be looking for alternative funding sources. And in the bottom there, we've prioritized a couple of key features for Max. So durability is certainly what is at the top of our list at this time because of his gait and that low tone. We know that he does fall and trips happen frequently, so the device is likely to get bumped or dropped. We also know that those core words, so those words that are used most of the time, are very important. He's had exposure to them before and used them very successfully on his manual boards. And we need him to have something that he can truly become that he can truly communicate novelly with, right? We also know that he used an iPad at school. But so we're kind of thinking about that size of the device again, right? Like he's used an iPad before at school successfully, but we might want to also consider something slightly smaller than an iPad to see if that might be more beneficial for him. There we're kind of weighing if the device gets smaller, what does his fine motor look like on the screen? Is he still as accurate? Do we lose accuracy there? And because of his high receptive language skills and the fact that he's a very quick learner, we want a big, robust vocabulary that can really grow with him in the system as we're looking at this for the next couple of years.
And there were a couple questions in the chat window, one about comparing LAMP and touch chat for students. And so I said, hold on, and we're gonna dive into that funnel with those coming up. And then there was a question about what about children with behaviors and those that tend to throw things? And again, I think considering the durability, considering the other options in certain situations, sometimes we've had to swap if we see that they're in an elevated state, maybe like Jennifer said, using that low tap option in between. And I think working as a team to work through, what is causing the behaviors? Is it part of the communication breakdown or something else? I've also seen teams that have created ways to mount it to the table for those instances, just so it isn't something easily picked up to throw. And so, yeah, lots of things to consider.
Absolutely. All right. So the part Heather and I get excited about the stuff, right? We know all this stuff comes first, but now we're talking about the actual stuff, the hardware, the software, the technology part of this. So let's dive a little bit deeper into the solutions that might match Max's needs. As Heather mentioned, first we're going to look at the PRC solutions that are available, and then Heather's going to guide you through the Saltillo solutions. So this is a comparison chart that you have available in your handouts. You see that indicated by the little toolbox there. So again, under the materials tab. Somebody had asked what the kickstand was. That's just kind of the stand that comes out of the back of the device, so that the option would be laying the device kind of flat on the table or having a built-in stand that puts it more at an angle. So for some people, based on their motor skills or their vision needs, maybe having it at the angle might be easier to access than down on the table. You bet. So pulling out our comparison chart here for the PRC line of products, we're really going to look at how we can take a pretty simple feature matching chart and just walk you through it. So this is something that you could do in your appointments, that you have access to this this comparison grid. And really, we're going to just look through the different features of each of these devices to determine which ones might meet our needs. And from there, we're going to come up with that list of devices that we might want to try. So first off, I'm really going to walk you through just what we're seeing here. If you haven't seen any of these device options before, I want to walk you through what we have that is available. And then we're going to kind of walk through this thinking about Max and his more specific needs. So first off, on the far left side here, we see the Accent family of devices. I can see here that these are Windows-based devices and they are dedicated communication devices. So the Accent devices from PRC are the device is really the device line that's the most flexible as far as the vocabulary configurations are concerned. So if we're looking down under those vocabulary options in that column, you can see that the depth of the vocabulary programs are offered here. So it looks like there are quite a few options for vocab. So that might be something in my head that I go, okay, there's a couple of options here that we could actually try on this particular device. It also lists here our product and support information. So we're going to drop down to that line for product and support. And we're looking here and we see that there is a lifetime of training and support that's provided with this line of device options. So again, if this is an important feature, this might be that's something that we're putting a star next to or highlighting. On the Accent devices, they are the most flexible devices that PRC has in the lineup, and that also means that we have a variety of different access methods or alternative access methods on the devices. So if you're looking at that column under alternative access, we can see that you can access the device directly through direct select with a key guard or a touch guide or a tactile key guide. We also have switch scanning, head tracking, and eye tracking capabilities as well. And then I am looking at the warranty here and see that in the Accent product line, it has a 2-year warranty, and it does have the potential to be funded by insurance. Moving on to the center 2 columns here, we have our iOS-based dedicated solutions. So we were talking earlier about how one option would be to kind of DIY, as Heather said. I like that. I'm gonna remember that one. We have the option to kind of DIY an iPad with all of these different features that we need and kind of piece it together. But the options that we have that are pre-made for you and considered durable medical device equipment are listed in the center here. So these are iOS devices that are dedicated solutions. We can start to compare here the screen size the screen size offerings between the 2 iOS options, so the Prio Mini and the Via Pro. So we're looking at the difference in the size here. And we can also see that there's some differences between what is available for vocabulary on the iOS devices in comparison to the Accent family of devices. So when I'm looking at the Prio Mini, I can see there's just one vocabulary program that's called Lamp Words for Life available. We kind of took a quick peek at the Accent family of devices there for the vocab options. And now I'm going across to the Via Pro, and I can see that there's a couple of options, Lamp Words for Life also being one of them there. For both options in the middle here, we see that free consultant support and training as well for as long as you have the device. And under the access methods that we can, I'm sorry, I'm stumbling here over my words. Over our access methods section, we can see here that it's a little bit more limited as far as the alternative access goes when we're comparing the iOS options to the Accent family of devices. So I can see that switch scanning could be an option, and head tracking would not be an option with Lamp Words for Life if we were looking at that at this time. So we're also comparing our warranties here between the Accent product line and the iOS product line, so making some comparisons there. And lastly here in the very last column, we see the customer bundled iOS device option. So this is really the DIY model that Heather had talked about. So this is kind of just estimating for you if a family were to purchase the iPad, purchase the vocabulary program, maybe some peripheral equipment, kind of what those considerations would be. All right, so on our next slide here, we're pulling Max back into the picture, and we just kind of want to show you how you could take this simple comparison chart and really weed out which devices PRC has that might not meet Max's needs so that we can really focus in on the ones that would, that we might want to consider for trial. So from the list of features above, I know that the durability and the portability were at the top of the list for him, followed by that option to use a key guard or a touch guide. I also, in my role, am very familiar with the vocabulary programs, so I can tell you that LAMP Words for Life and Unity would both be core-based vocabulary programs that we might be considering here for him. Having awareness of the vocabulary programs and all of the ins and outs certainly comes with time, but that is where you could always reach out to your local consultant when you get to this point of consideration, and have their guidance in kind of looking for the vocabulary program that helps to meet that need as well. So really, in looking at the grid here, we can narrow down our choices to find which device options are best to focus on. And let's take a look at what we're focusing in on. So when we're looking at Max's needs, we know that he has that low muscle tone, but he can isolate an index finger for pointing, and we see him doing that on his parents' phone. We also know that the use of a key guard or touch guide is going to aid in his ability to select that button size on the screen, and he's going to continue to kind of work on his accuracy. We listed touch settings here because in thinking about him working on his accuracy with touch, there might be some settings on the device that could help support that as well. So all three choices here, so we are, direct select, key guard, touch guide, and then those touch settings. We're going to move forward onto the language system. So we know that he has higher receptive language skills, and we know that he's understanding more than he's able to express, obviously here. And we want to make sure, because of that, that we have a very robust vocabulary available to him. We know that he's used low-tech options before that had core words and was doing well with that. So a system that offers him the ability to continue to use those core words, but expand really his expressive communication and vocabulary would be ideal. And we're focused really on those core vocabulary programs that support novel utterance generation. So the software programs that could meet his needs through PRC would be Unity and LAMP Words for Life, as I mentioned before, both of which would be available on our Accent 800 or 1000, while the Prio Mini and the VIA Pro only have that LAMP Words for Life device, Words for Life program as an option. For Max, we know that his low muscle tone can occasionally cause him to stumble or fall when he's walking. He also is bumping into things, as we had talked about before. So having a protective case on his device is something that certainly could benefit him. So with keeping durability in mind, kind of at the top of his list, we've actually gone to rule out the Prio Mini. We can see that the warranty, it's a 1-year warranty on the Prio Mini, and we know that it doesn't have the same durability as the Accent and the VIA Pro. So now here you can see that we have two sizes of the Accent here and that VIA Pro. So the Accent 800, the Accent 1000, and for those we're looking at LAMP Words for Life or the Unity vocabulary. And then on the iOS device, the VIA Pro, we're looking at LAMP Words for Life. So we've kind of narrowed down these options, ruled a couple things out here. The other things we're looking at include just the ability for him to transport this device independently, right? Is he going to be carrying this independently or with help? We're thinking about that portability. Does he need that handle and a carrying strap? We're thinking about the size of the screen for his vision and motor needs, what the warranty options look like, and then also that training and support piece. So after looking at all of these areas, we've really narrowed down the PRC solutions here. And you can see for our device options that we're considering, we have the Accent 800 and 1000, as well as the VIA Pro. And then our language solutions over on the right, which would be the Unity family of software, and that could be LAMP Words for Life or Unity 60 and 84. So you can kind of see that lineup of different options there. Certainly, as you become more familiar with the software and the device features, you might be able to roll some of the devices out without officially trialing them based on this knowledge as well. So here's a closer peek at the Accent 1000 with that 60 sequenced vocabulary. So this was chosen because it really has both that LAMP Words for Life vocabulary program on it, as well as Unity. So both of those were things that had met our needs. So it seemed like a logical step forward would be to trial the Accent, because we could try both of the vocabulary programs. So the Accent 1000 is a 10-inch screen, and it has the Unity vocabulary shown here. I'm going to, Heather, switch the screen for me so that we have that Unity 60 sequence showing in a more easy to read format, we'll say. I'm not sure what happened to that previous image, but we'll have to fix that. This is a manual board that you guys have access to in your materials tab as well. So this is just a little clip that shows you Unity 60 sequenced as the vocabulary. So again, it's part of that Unity family of software. And it really focuses on the words that are most often used, that core vocabulary. The core vocabulary words on this device are the words that are going to be easiest to find and easiest to say, because we know that they're used most often. So we know that we use words like eat and drink more frequently than we might say apple juice or water. So you're going to see words like eat and drink on the main page here. The device also has specific places for all of the fringe vocabulary. So you can certainly customize in your people, your places, and your things in a logical, with logical organization there. And we had also mentioned that Max was looking to using that keyboard in Unity 60 sequence. We also have access to that keyboard, as well as a place for pre-stored phrases and sentences. So keeping the Unity vocabulary in mind in general, Unity is our most flexible vocabulary program that we carry, because it could be configured with really as few as one, but up to 144 different locations. So that means, I always call these the bumps in the road. You could have 4 or 8 or 15 or 28, all the way up to 144 icons showing on the screen, depending on your user's needs. We have 2 different levels. It's not a prerequisite that you start with one hit and go to sequence. There's just 2 different varieties of Unity. One is a little bit more simplified than the other. And all of the vocabulary in Unity is learned through a consistent motor pattern. So it has very logical organization, where we teach you through motor planning where you'll find certain types of words, whether they be your pronouns, your verbs, your adjectives, or your nouns. So over time, you develop what we call motor automaticity, kind of that idea of your brain has taken over and your hand is just moving to where you need to be. We also have some nice features built in. A word finder that helps you find words that you're not sure where they are in the system, as well as a fantastic vocabulary builder. This is a tool that you can use that would allow you to hide all of the vocabulary on the device and just select the words that you want to be visible. So this can really help with growing language over time, or be used as that more therapeutic tool. So we wanted to just quickly practice with you where you can find a couple of these different words on the Unity 60 sequenced vocabulary board. It's a paper version, so it's obviously not going to sequence, but we're just going to point out where a couple of these words are for you. Heather, are you able to? Awesome. Okay, so the first one is want.
I always take a second, sorry.
No, you're fine. I know it always feels a little backwards in the presentation. And more over on the right-hand side there by stop. And help just down one row and to the right. And we could use this at that single word level for some of those high frequency words. We could also start to put words into short little phrases. So want more or want help. And we could add those pronouns for some sentences. I want help. I want more. And we could add in one of those verbs, play. I want to. Green word, to. Play is the dice. and then more over on that right-hand side. So you could see how using Unity, we could grow from that single word to the phrase to the sentence all within one program. I'm going to turn it over to Heather here, and she is going to guide your exploration through the Saltillo product lines.
All right, and for time's sake, since the comparison chart is laid out the exact same way as the PRC's comparison chart, I won't break down all of the little pieces, but just know that when we're looking at those Saltillo solutions, the left side is going to be the NovaChat family of devices, ranging in size from 5-inch to 12-inch, with the classic and active wraps available on the NovaChat 8 and NovaChat 10. Vocabulary options. I know there was some comments, questions about touch chat and the NovaChat, the different hardwares with the same vocabulary files. And there's quite a variety of vocabulary files in there. Often and most used is word power, but there are other options in there, and there are more options available on NovaChat for those scanning purposes with switch scanning. Same thing for the training and support, free for the life of the device, as well as all those extras that are listed there. NovaChats have key guards and touch guides, as well as switch scanning available, wired or wireless. The NovaChat 5 does not have key guards or touch guides. And then our dedicated devices have the 3-year warranty. We have a TouchChat Express 8 as our iOS option, and the VIA Pro with TouchChat with word power. So again, looking at those different sizes, the supports, key guards and touch guides and switch scanning are available on both of those. And then on the VIA Pro with TouchChat with word power, you do have the ability to do head tracking, utilizing the facial recognition capabilities of that iPad Pro. So that just adds one more alternative access option. And then there is those bundleable iOS DIY, as we said. So then we're going to move on to our little buddy Max, and similarly whittling down our choices. So knowing that we had been looking at that 8 to 10-inch size screen, we have the NovaChat 8 and NovaChat 10 available. We have that TouchChat Express 8 and the VIA Pro, which is that 11 to 12-inch size iPad Pro. We ruled out that TouchChat Express 8 with that durability that we needed, but portability-wise, those both could be options for him with NovaChat or VIA Pro. And then we do have the key guard or the touch guide available for both of those, or all 3 of those models. So if we look at that funnel approach again and looking at Max's needs with his tone, all those things that Megan summarized for us on our feature matching sheet, we can start to pull that in and start thinking more about those NovaChat 8, NovaChat 10, and then that VIA Pro, so that all of those things with the key guard, direct select, the touch guide, or those touch settings are all available. Language system-wise, we know that he had those higher receptive skills and he's had access to low-tech core words. The word power family makes the most sense then. We have options of word power 42 basic, word power 48, and word power 60 basic. The 42 basic and 60 basic files are going to have a few features built in to help us combine those words, help him have that predictable logical next words to help start forming phrases and sentences. So that might be something to consider where word power 48, or if we're looking at word power 42 or word power 60, that logical next words with the navigating might not, is not there and would not be needed if he didn't need to combine. He'd be choosing those categories and moving around. So we can consider those, and the key guards and touch guides are available. For him, with that durability, we would probably want to be looking at NovaChat 8 and NovaChat 10 active, so that active wrap around there. It's an EVA foam that beefs up the durability on it, so that when he's bumping into things, it also moves the case away from the screen a little bit more too. It bumps it out, and so having that ability to protects the screen just a little bit more is a good option. And the VIA Pro with Touch Chat also available with that active wrap to provide that durability factor for him. Those other things that we want to consider funneling in right here for him is how independently he can access it and transport it, the size of the screen for vision or accessing with that key guard. So do we need that bigger screen with the key guard to have more buttons per page, or can he handle it? I just had a young man this week and staff were a little concerned about doing an 8-inch size screen for him with WordPower 60 Basic. He had a trimmer. So we're going to look at the key guard, but we're also looking at a little bit of a press and hold so that he has the opportunity to get to that button, press and hold it, and select it. So again, looking at the different screen options and seeing how they do. Looking at the training and support from that comparison chart, as well as talking to your consultant about those different things that might be needed for the family. And knowing that Saltillo offers training and support to the families and the school teams and the professionals for the life of the device. So if that's something that's important to them, utilizing that. So as we put all that into the funnel, we came out with these 3 options for him to try. The NovaChat 8 Active, NovaChat 10 Active, and the VIA Pro with WordPower. With Touch Chat with WordPower, and we would be considering these 3 language files for him during our trial period. As again, Megan mentioned, as you become more familiar with those different layouts and how they function, how they navigate, how they allow you to access words, you can start to whittle out some of them even more. And so as I looked at it and put everything through the funnel here for Max, the team really thinks NovaChat 10 Active with WordPower 60 Basic is going to meet his needs. He's seen our WordPower 60 Basic low-tech board at school and knows how that's organized. And so similarly in your handouts, you have a WordPower 60 Basic manual board here. It does say 96 locations because it does have those question words, some social phrases, and more core action words right here on the main page. Key points for WordPower to consider: those WordPower configurations of 20 buttons all the way up to 140 buttons per page. Again, thinking through, looking at it, I can relate to this where we want to start with smaller, and sometimes that's not always the best option. We do have those 20 and 25 for vision and motor and scanning needs, but if we're thinking about trying to move them up, the words start to move. There is a little bit of more memory, motor plan based approach with WordPower and how it's organized. So if I start moving those core words he really knows how to use, by moving him from 20 to 42 or 60, he's got to relearn where those are. He's got to rescan the page to find those. WordPower is based off of those high frequency core words for creating novel utterances, and the efficiency of quick navigating to get those logical next words. So that way you're able to create 2, 3, 4 word utterances with fewer button hits. And then we do have the word finder ability as well. So on your manual board that is in your tools, we can follow along and do the same words that we were doing on the Unity sequence. And so if I'm looking for want, it's down here on the bottom row. More is going to be over here on the side. Help is going to be kind of middle, lower left. And I can start combining as well. So just like I said, that little preschooler, want more. I could do want help. I've got my pronouns. I want help. I want more. Or maybe I'm doing I want, and then depending upon their language level, I can do 2, or maybe I'm just jumping all the way over to play. I want play more. So building those sentences as their vocabulary grows and is able to do that. I see we have some great questions, and we're going to cover some next steps, and then we're going to address these questions in the chat window. So what's next? There are more, most manufacturers of AAC devices and apps have a consultant available to you to reach out to. So learn about who your contacts are for the different companies in your area. When you've decided what you want to try, reach out to them, discuss those trial options. If you have apps in your clinic or your school that you can start out with, and then look at hardware with them. What training are you going to need to get started? Are you comfortable starting that discussion with the family, or do you want them involved? We're happy to do that sort of thing. I really enjoy being part of that discussion. So reach out to us.
Yeah, and I'll say it, now when you're kind of reaching out to your reps as that next step, if you're using these toolkits that we've looked at across the last couple of days, you're really kind of armed with the right tools to really be talking more specifically to the reps about the features you're looking at as well. We can certainly help guide that conversation and ask those questions, but you can also kind of come to the meeting with that information to say, I'm looking for a system that uses core vocabulary, has access to these types of key guards, maybe a synthesized, we want computer generated speech. You might already have that list of features. So more quickly, we can really help you narrow down which device we have that might help you meet that need as well.
Yeah, and then referring you back to that Explore AAC website to learn more about AAC, to share with families, to look at device trials, and to also find your consultant. So at the top of the web page is actually a spot where you can click and then click on your state, and it'll show you your PRC consultant and your Saltillo consultant with their contact info. So if you're like me and lose business cards, this is a great way to just go click. And if you do have more questions after today, please reach out to those local consultants by connecting through Explore AAC. And then questions that I did see, I know Megan addressed some of them. I did see one towards the end, Maureen. How does pricing for dedicated devices typically compare with that for apps? And I would say, obviously, if you're just buying the iPad and the app, it's just the price of the iPad and the app and buying a case. When we're looking at those bundled funded options of iOS devices, like you saw on our comparison chart, people will often ask about the price tag on that, and that includes the durable medical grade cases. It includes the warranty stuff. It includes the training, that sort of thing. So that's why it looks, so different compared to if I just DIY. And keeping that in mind, again, as those features that do we need them, do we not need them, and how important is it, and what is our funding source? So good question. I'm trying to think if there was any. I know there was another question, Tracy, when a warranty says that range of 1 to 3 years. So I know, say for like our Via Pro, if you are paying for it out of pocket and don't need it dedicated, there's basic warranty, and then you can add extended warranty. Most funding sources like insurance don't pay for added warranty years. So that is why the range is listed on there. So talking to your consultants about what model you're getting and what the warranty would be for that one. And then just know, often we hear, well, if there's a 3-year warranty or 2-year warranty and we can't get another one funded for 5 years, it's still able to get repairs funded through their insurance. And so that covers anything that's outside of the warranty, if that helps. Perfect. Well, we thank you all so much for joining us for 3 days and hope that this was helpful. I see some thank yous in the message window here saying that they found it helpful, so we appreciate that. If you take time to use that evaluation report at the end, we would love your feedback. And we'll stay on for a couple more minutes for those that have questions. Otherwise, really, we thank you and have a wonderful rest of your day. All right, I think that's it. Have a wonderful Wednesday, everyone.
Thanks so much, everybody.